Hello, welcome back, PlayBASIC coders. Pretty much an end of year wrap up blog, whatever you want to call it. Let's jump into the first thing. Quick demo. Where is it gone? There it is. There. Da, 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 da. Oh, bit of a Christmas tree. Lovely. Yep. Okay. That is really just a sinus cone. We're drawing an image of each ball, drawing circles to highlight certain things like their glitter or whatever, connecting some of the branches and, well, a few things anyway. I'll put that code up on the boards when I'm done with this. Merry Christmas, by the way. For those who don't celebrate it, happy holidays anyway, regardless. The other main thing that's been updated in PB or PlayBASIC is the ray tracer. I think it's set to a high resolution. Yeah, set to 2x2. So we'll go to a quarter of the resolution so we can thrash it out a bit. So our metric's pretty much the same. That's the classic ray trace method. It's doing every trace, every shadow cast as well. We have a PVS method now, which is a potential visibility sets. You can hit F5 to get a toggle. We're missing the shadows there, by the way. Let's put the shadows back. All this really means is that we're creating a short list of what objects share each region of the screen. So if we add more objects, hang on, which ones add? That's it. Turn off the debug window stuff. There we go. Yeah. So it's much quicker. Effectively what we're doing is we're making short lists so the rays don't check for intersections against objects that are clearly not possible to be intersected with. We're sitting on top of a giant sphere, by the way. In the test I showed the other day, you push it up pretty high, and it still actually chugs along, even with shadows now, which is kind of crazy because it definitely it wasn't fast enough beforehand. Now we don't have reflections. And it's just a sphere, so don't get too excited. But this is just the math library test inside PlayBASIC. That's what I've been doing lately. Trying to bring all of these features into PlayBASIC to acclimatise people for what's going to happen. As we move to 3D, you're going to kind of have to wrap your head around vectors and matrices and intersection functions in particular. We're at 400 objects there with shadows, as with PVS enable. If I disable PVS, you'll get a sense of how much time it actually takes to do all of those ray intersections. A lot of time. Yeah. Turn it back on. I think the most fun one actually is when you just bump it up as high as it'll go, and even with shadows it's still sort of, it's a slideshow, but oh hang on, sorry, wrong way. It's a slideshow, but it's kind of a fun tech demo, and it just keeps you thinking about, well, what other optimizations can you make to this kind of scene? Now, in this particular situation, there are more and more objects are blocking out other objects, so we're actually getting benefit for them occluding other things. 1,000 objects, spheres, yeah, pretty crappy, but a great test of the math library in classically, effectively PlayBASIC running through the runtime. Right. that's a bit of fun. That's what we've been doing. The other thing I've been doing lately, and banging my head against the wall for some of the tooling, is that getting back to trying to flesh out these documentation sections as much as I can. So we've got more and more libraries coming online. We've got a PCX library now, which was written for the Wolf 3D demo. Might as well be a library. You know, it's a rare instance that you might need to load a PCX file, but there's something there for you now to do that. You don't have to include a massive library that does a whole bunch of other stuff and PCX. It's just, here's a loader, off you go. The newest additions are the vectors library, matrix, and intersections. Let's have a look. We've got descriptions. I wouldn't get too excited so far. I've been using Grok in this example to help document these things, and it produces, you know, some good stuff and some bad stuff. So most examples are kind of not quite working, but at this point, I feel it's better to have something and rather than nothing. So to pick through. So we've got vector 2 stuff, vector 3 stuff. So if you don't know, that's a two-dimensional vector. Just think of that as an X and Y pair, a 2D coordinate for screen positions or whatever, or 3D coordinates over here. Now we don't have 3D rendering as such, but as we move into 3D rendering, you'll have to acclimatize yourself for these concepts because they're not going away. Yeah. So the library is pretty robust. There's some more things I want to add to it. Hopefully I'm not creating a rod from my own back, but all of that code is effectively just cut and pastable across into PlayBASIC 2, so I'm not terribly concerned about that. A light matricey library. Again, the current documentation here is written by AI mostly. I've got to clean some things up in it to be correct, actually. But like even that, I mean, it's taken 3 days to document those three libraries. There's not that many functions there really. Point in AA is effectively a point in it's not really a cube, it's really a rectangle, a non-rotated box or an axis-aligned bounding box. As point in sphere in 3 dimensions, so you've got ray intersections with that bounding box. You can do those. There's 2 different flavors of it. You can have one that returns the normal of the intersection, one that doesn't. You've got a plane intersection, same. The naming convention is the same. We've got a supposed fast version. Under the hood, really, it's just a parameter being passed through to the same function, regardless whether you want to test that or not. So in the main version here, you don't have those parameters. It's computing that regardless, and all the intersection functions return the data in the out structure, and this is really we'll have to go through and clean this up a little bit. Actually, I think I'll need like maybe a structures thing, or intersection common types or whatever. They're included in the libraries, but they need to be into the documentation there so you can see what fields are inside them. So all the intersection types have used this structure. So it's one common thing. You call a function, you pass it the structure to return particular things about the intersection. So it might be the distance away or the time from wherever your ray is starting to this thing that you've hit, or it might be the normal at that point, or it might be In the case of triangles, it might be the UV coordinate of the surface we're hitting. The point of that really is for light mapping, if you didn't know, or another common use is like aligning bullet holes to walls, this kind of stuff. So we have some of this in here. I've been meaning to complement this particular set of functions with a mesh library that will have to be built into PB. And then some of the older 3D programs that we've written before can be just moved across to use the mesh libraries rather than hand rolling all the code ourselves. And the same goes for a lot of this other stuff back here too, where we're talking about doing vector stuff here with rotation, for example, or you can set up matrices-based rotation through matrix 3. Look, there's plenty of math libraries that do all this stuff, so really we're just dragging in existing libraries. Because we're building around an older version of the C compiler, we're kind of limited to what new features we can use, but it's pretty well performant. Most things are optimized to minimize memory access and to minimize branch predictions. So, particularly with intersections in those. So, anyway, nonetheless, this is what's happening with the documentation, which is, it's something I feel very strongly about these days, is the documentation needs to be not just tutorials, but it needs to talk about concepts as well. And I can think of a dozen different things that should be in the documentation, to be honest, but things that were commonplace ideas back in the day that maybe today are not, well, I would say today they're definitely not, actually. Anyway. So these are built, so they need to be cleaned up a bit and gone back through. And if I can add some more of these, like there's libraries that come with PB that are not documented. They're just kind of in the slibs folder and have code in them ready to go. I mean, how good that stuff is, I don't know. I would love to have got to a point where we can have, a full-blown GUI library that's you can drag into your projects and adopt the process of rendering the screen for those things. Whether it's Flex or something else, I mean, I wouldn't care. It makes no difference really. And not need to have, and negate the need to have a Windows, set of controls, which have long since deprecated. For this revision, really, there's a few things in this that, like we've added a bunch of new stuff, and things that you probably wouldn't expect, and things that were probably strange to people up front, like changing the way the compiler phrases certain things. That was done because I wanted to do the math libraries. The rendering stuff, I've got a few other rendering things that I have wanted to do for a long time that I would think that give you a functionality that it mightn't be as performant as what it could be, but it would let you do a thing, like maps, for example. If I think about maps, there's probably a dozen things I'd love to add to the mapping libraries. Beyond just the speeding up stuff that I did a while ago. I think it was like 6 months ago, I replaced all the allocation stuff underneath the map library with a better arena allocator. Fooled around with it for a few days, or probably a week or whatever it was. And that's actually made huge improvements to just creating and destroying maps all the time. You can just do that whenever you want now. Graphically, what I've always wanted to have is, I guess, two main things. One of them was that I felt it was always important that that maps would respond to blend modes. Now, I've added more support for blend modes in this revision than old versions. So you might find some old programs that behave weirdly because a command you're using now reacts to an ink mode that was set somewhere else where it never used to. Like, for example, if things like just drawing the map, just drawing the level itself, that should respond to ink modes. And like when I think of that, I'm thinking about that would let people create things like windows and overlays that are translucent. So you can have your own tile set that's animated, and then you're drawing the screen as like two layers over the top of each other. The base layer, which is all opaque, and then maybe the sprites, and then doing the foreground layer that's actually what's alpha blended or added to it, or whatever you want it to do. Just haven't got time to it. Haven't made it that far to do it. That's the problem. Like map, I shouldn't really talk about this stuff, but things I wanted to do for maps with adding things like, well, I'll give you a couple. One of them is to have things like ink mode support, so you can blend a level while it's rendered. Obviously, translation, so scaling this thing, it's very handy. Rotation as well, that fits into the camera concept as well. So you can have a camera that rotates a scene that's, even though the world's effectively two-dimensional, is 2D, you've got like a 2D fixed camera. But other things like metadata and maps. A classic thing that people would talk about or would be lost about, is how they make a large map and then populate that with the characters within their game, which really is just, you just have a list of creation points and the objects get placed at those locations. I mean, old games would do things like have certain tiles that represent spawn points within the map. They weren't visible to the player. They were just, it was like a tile. Let's say you got 1,000 tiles in your game, and let's say you use the last 50 tiles for certain kinds of character spawns or whatever. That could be actually added to the mapping system itself. That kind of stuff, anyway. I mean, graphically, there's a bunch of other things there that I wanted to do that I won't have time to do now before the end of the year. What's one that comes to mind? One that comes to mind was things like the strip commands for doing texturing. As far as I know, there's no native support for doing strips that are transparent. There's just no render for it. It was probably meant to get done, but it wasn't written. So that's a bit of a problem. And the same goes for those strip commands. They should be able to react to the ink mode support, so you can alpha blend something, or have it alpha addition or subtraction or multiplication or whatever. Just small things, right? Things that are easy with hardware acceleration that will be byproducts of what the API we use next is going to be, which is still actually being decided. I've been looking at two different branches of two different approaches. The results are basically the same, Anyway, for this, that would be really useful, and that would give people a carryover from where they are to where they're going. Even though the syntax won't be exactly the same, the solution won't be exactly the same. They're doing two different things. Like we can't make the 3D version and the 2D version behave identically. It's not really feasible. I mean, you shouldn't expect that. but we can add some of those kind of base ideas to, to the old version that would kind of bring it up to that specification without needing all of the hardware acceleration stuff. In terms of commands, as I said before, shapes themselves, there's so many things you can do as a byproduct of shapes. It's just kind of crazy. You have the what I like a lot actually is having a shape, or just a draw mode for a shape actually, where you can attach an object to the vertices in a shape and then distort the shape with, whether it's just distorting the vertices manually or whatever. So it would make things like doing the classic, have a bunch of characters orbiting a ship or something like that, trivial. You create a shape with a bunch of points in it, tell it to draw some particular image at each vertex and just draw it. That's pretty much where we are. I think for one last little tech demo, we'll look back at, I'm not sure what's in this. This is Polywoof 14. What I've been meaning to do, and I've got the conversation I was talking about before about having meshes in PlayBASIC, that's imperative. We need to bring that forward into PlayBASIC for a few different reasons. I don't want to have a situation where I have all new code in one big blob. That's just asking for trouble. So if we take elements of that will be in PB2 or PlayBASIC 2, introduce them back in PlayBASIC 1, give people an option of understanding this stuff, and then the mesh library is really just a way of creating three-dimensional objects. That's all it is. There's a version of, this kind of concept is in here. That's what this big blob of code here does. I don't know, what is it? 2,000 lines of this stuff. Now, I'm not saying that this will drop into the engine. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that having a library where it lets us have vertices, have faces, manage those things as an object, and then either render it manually or have a render option for ourselves, which is probably the better option, of course, is something that's very valuable and something that people have been asking for a long time. Now, given we're talking about software rendering of this scene, we can't do, crazy stuff, but we can do some sort of fun things. This is the old, Polywoof demo from. It's actually showing a bunch of the newer features that are in 165 that weren't possible before. You couldn't do variable alpha blending of objects, let alone all the other stuff. I forget what the keys in this program do, actually. Sorry. So you can, here I've just got all the characters moving in and out, whatever. Now, all of these meshes here, I'm rotating all the vertices, I'm doing all the work, projecting this stuff, and then putting it into the scene buffer. Same with our floors and walls and all that good stuff. I mean, principles like, if we have, there we go. When we apply lighting, it's the same principle. We're dynamically changing the polygon's colors as, in this case, based on its depth away from the camera. But if you have dynamic lighting, then you need to have a concept of what that means to you. How does that even work? Is it some sort of special box that you just gotta go, add me a light, and then I know it'll happen. that people will be like, oh dude, it doesn't run a million frames per second when I have 3,000 lights in the scene. And you go, yeah, that's because the cost per vertex is so high to process all those verts in software. So understanding all that stuff up front, and then doing things like ray intersections against objects and working out how collision's going to work, and having that stuff in your vocabulary as we move forward is essential. Because if you don't know it, you're not going to be writing much. I quite like this demo now. It's suitably insane. I'm inside a character. Like the previous versions of this actually run on, I think they run on the old Learning Edition with only a few changes. I think there's some font parameters that are different, and that's about the size of it. I think it's the get array pointer commands. The get array pointer command is different too, so you have to sort of manually do that. What the newer version of that command does in the older versions of PB to make it work, but in principle it's the same thing. You can't run this one the same because this has new commands in it that don't exist in the old versions. Like the shaded polygon stuff doesn't exist, which now is just one command. You can just call it. If you set the ink mode prior to rendering those things, you can alpha blend them out variably, etc. It's not perfect. I'm not claiming it is, but I did want to make this into a fun little tech demo, and just haven't got to it. Just really haven't got to it. I'd sort of hoped to get the math stuff done and the mesh stuff done in particular, so we can have like ray intersections against objects and things like that. And we'll probably make these mesh libraries that are inside here. We'll bring those into PB libraries so we can kind of get used to the idea of geometry, maybe writing your own libraries for other simple object formats or whatever you want. There's plenty of examples out there. These need some work. They're definitely not finished. They're just kind of bare bones loaders that I'd written years ago for other projects and stuck them in here as something to do, which in this case here, it gives you a leg up, and that's the whole point. I really wanted these demos to reflect what's new in PlayBASIC 165 or whatever it becomes called. Probably 166, I guess. We've had so much stuff in the last 6 months. It's crazy. It really is crazy. Anyway, I think that'll have to do. If I don't see you before Christmas time or whatever, have a great Christmas. Enjoy your holidays if you're having a holiday. If you don't celebrate it, fair enough. That's all good. Enjoy the New Year's period. Be safe. All that good stuff. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time, PlayBASIC coders. Bye. See you in 26.